All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking at something you might not expect.
Yeah.
But actually, when you think about it, it's really connected to a lot of stuff we've been covering, with like power dynamics and high-stakes decision-making and things like that. And that is influence. And specifically, we're going to be looking at influence through the lens of espionage.
Okay.
So we're going to be taking a look at a book called The Grammar of Intelligence.
Right.
By Mark Imperiali. So Mark Imperiali, he was an intelligence operative for 15 years. He was undercover, did all sorts of crazy stuff.
Wow.
So this guy really knows his stuff when it comes to influence.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So he breaks down influence into 3 core pillars.
Okay.
The first one being trust.
Okay, trust.
Yeah. So you're probably thinking, well, yeah, of course, trust is important. But Imperiali really emphasizes that it's more than just important. It's really like the foundation upon which you build any sort of successful interaction that you want to be strategic.
Yeah.
So like think about it. Let's say you're in the boardroom.
Right.
If you don't have trust amongst the members of the board, it's going to be really difficult to get anything done. You're not going to be able to make those high stakes decisions because no one's going to trust each other's judgment.
Yeah, that's true. It's interesting, because I think about, like you're saying, how it kind of relates back to some of the stuff we've talked about before. Yeah. Power dynamics come into play there too, right? Because if you have someone who is in a position of power, but they haven't built that trust with the people that they're trying to influence, then it's going to be really hard for them to get people to, go along with their decisions.
Right. Imperiali really emphasizes that intelligence work, cultivating genuine relationships is absolutely essential to getting people to cooperate. So it's not about just manipulation or, tricking people into doing something that you want them to do. It's really about building authentic connections. And so, I think that's a really important takeaway. Especially, it makes me think about those, like I was saying, those high stakes situations in the business world. If you can build trust with the people that you work with, you're so much more likely to get buy-in on big decisions. People are going to be more willing to take risks with you.
Absolutely.
If they feel like they can trust your judgment. So the second pillar that Imperiali talks about is patience.
Oh.
So this one's all about timing. It's about understanding that influence is not like a one-time event. It's a process. So you can't just like force your will on someone. You need to wait for the right moment to make your move. And I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with, because we're all kind of in a hurry these days. We want things to happen quickly. And so it can be really difficult to be patient. But when it comes to influence, it's absolutely essential.
I see what you mean. So it's more about kind of like nudging things in the right direction rather than like forcing them to go the way you want them to.
It is. It's like guiding. He uses the word guiding rather than forcing.
That's a good way to put it.
And it's also recognizing that like people need time to come to their own conclusions, right? You give them the information, and then you have to give them time to process it. And, come around to your way of thinking. So, think about like a major business deal. You don't want to go in there and try to force the other person to sign on the dotted line right away. You have to kind of cultivate that relationship over time. Plant those seeds. Wait for the right opportunity to really present your case. So, patience is key.
Interesting.
So the third pillar is, it's a bit more complex. He calls it accurate behavioral decryption.
Okay. Accurate behavioral decryption.
Yeah. Sounds kind of intense, right?
Yeah, it does.
But what it really means is being able to read between the lines.
Okay.
So it's paying attention to those subtle cues. Like body language, tone of voice, things like that, that reveal what someone is really thinking, even if they're not explicitly saying it.
So it's like being able to tell when someone's saying one thing, but they actually mean something else. Interesting.
So being able to pick up on those inconsistencies can be hugely valuable in a strategic interaction. Imagine you're in a board meeting again. And someone says, I agree with your proposal, but you notice that their arms are crossed. And, they're kind of like frowning. Those are signs that maybe they're not actually on board with what you're saying. So being able to pick up on those nonverbal cues can really help you to understand the situation.
So it's about paying attention to like the whole picture, not just the words people are saying.
Exactly. So to recap, Imperiali's 3 pillars of influence are trust,
Yeah.
patience, and accurate behavioral decryption.
Okay.
And he argues that by mastering these principles, you can turn everyday interactions into strategic advantages, not just in the world of espionage,
Right.
but in any field where you're trying to make things happen.
Yeah.
And you know what I was thinking about while you were talking about that is, you know how sometimes we talk about how to protect yourself from being influenced?
Yeah.
But I think what's really interesting about Imperiali's approach is that he's really focused on how to use influence for good.
Yeah.
Like how to influence people in a way that is ethical.
Right.
That benefits everyone involved.
That is an interesting perspective, yeah, because I think it's easy to think of influence as like a manipulative tool.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be that way.
Right, exactly.
It can be used to, bring people together to achieve common goals.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that's something really important for us to all keep in mind as we're thinking about how we use influence in our own lives. Well, that was great. Thanks for taking a deep dive with me into the world of espionage and influence. I hope our listeners out there learn something and will maybe feel a little bit like James Bond today.
It does kind of make you think about like the ethical implications of influence too, right? Like as we're developing these skills, how do we make sure that we're using them responsibly?
That's a great point. I mean, it's a really powerful tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that's something that's really worth considering.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
See you then.
Bye.